Well, it didn't rain on Saturday at Zandvoort either, so we could enjoy the blue skies, the sunshine, the beach, the wind, the crosswind. Lots of complaints about that. We'll chat about that anyway. And we could enjoy watching the two McLaren drivers fight it out for the pole. I suggested yesterday that the slight power was with Lando Norris, not necessarily because of his momentum from the previous races, but mainly because of how well he was driving through Sector 2 yesterday. That key part of Sector 2, which is turns 8 and 9, going through a very quick 6-gear right-hander, braking into a tighter right-hander with turning in on the brakes. Everybody has to turn in on the brakes there because it's a tightening radius corner. And Lando looking really good there yesterday, letting the car breathe, very free, looking like a guy who was going to be on the pole. But in the end, it was his teammate, Oscar Piastri, who got the pole. The classic sort of Jack Brabham response afterwards to Jolyon Palmer when Jolyon said, well, you dug it out at the last millisecond there, Oscar, how did you do that? And he said, well, there were a couple of corners where Lando was better than me, and I think we're talking about 8, 9 here. So rather than fight that, I just tried to go a bit quicker where I was good, which I'm not sure is actually true, but it sounded good. It was, as I say, very blackjack in the way he was able to sum it all up and get on to the next question. So let's have a look in detail at the difference between the two of them. No doubt at all in my mind, going into this race and indeed throughout yesterday and today, that Oscar Piastri was always going to be quicker through super quick corners like Shivlak. I haven't talked about it very much. It's the right-hander, the blind brow right-hander. Used to be an amazing corner because there was a straight afterwards. It was pretty straight anyway. Now there's not a lot of time to enjoy how quick you are before you have to go into that right-hand kink. Let's call it a right-hand kink, 6th gear from 8th gear. And Oscar was always very, very good through there. And indeed he was today. But for me, the turning point of qualifying was actually at the end of Q1 when both McLaren drivers, with Lando now at the moment still quicker than Oscar as he had been all weekend, but both drivers going out in the second phase on a used set of soft tyres. And Oscar going like 3/10 quicker and suddenly heading the times at the end of Q1. Classic racing drivers maneuver. Let's just get the balance sorted now. I'm going to be quickest here, and I'm going to go and do that lap right at the end of Q1 on used tyres. And he did that, to my eye, by matching exactly what Lando had been doing through that 8-9 section until that point. The big difference between the two of them, well, massive difference between the McLaren drivers and everybody else, because they uniquely, it appears, are taking 3rd gear for turn 9, which is the tighter tightening radius right-hander. And the factory Mercedes team, by comparison, with the same engine, like Red Bull, like Ferrari, staying in 4th gear for that right-hander. But both McLaren drivers going for 3rd gear there, just different ratios, I guess. But maybe that tells you something also about the way that car is to drive. It is just so drivable and so chuckable that they can just go down an extra gear and know that they can keep that back end stuck, glued to the road. Anyway, it was on that second run that Oscar Piastri did what Lando had been doing right up to that point, which is going down to a much, much lower minimum speed in 3rd gear. Lando typically, and FP3 was a good example, had been going down to about 129 kilometers an hour. And the slowest I ever saw Oscar Piastri there was 134. Now you think, wow, well that's good. He's quicker than Lando. But as I said many times, the minimum speed, particularly on a slow speed corner with traction being an important part of it, is not important. The critical thing obviously is the entry and then the exit, and how well you can get that exit in terms of direction of the car, direction change you want to make mid-corner, and how well it's going to accelerate, how free it is to the road. And I think that's why Lando was always super good through there. But in the second phase of Q1, that's when Oscar finally did what Lando had been doing. And he floated the car, no throttle or no brakes, right down to 123 kilometers an hour in 3rd gear, let it sit there, and then got a beautiful acceleration run. The result, he was quickest. And that kind of changed the dynamic. From Lando's point of view, it was, well, this is going to be close. I need to get in a perfect lap. And I'm not sure, I'd be surprised if they were saying to him, his engineer was saying to him, don't worry, Lando, you've still got that S2 advantage. All you got to do now is stitch the lap together. The wind is chunky, the wind is variable. Use that, make sure that you know exactly what you're doing going into turn 1 in terms of braking area. Don't brake too late. Don't fall into the trap of feeling the pressure, because you still have this significant advantage in Sector 2. And Lando did that pretty well. He stuck with what he's been doing, but the problem was that Oscar then picked up speed, as he said, the corners where he was good. And let's look at Shivlak now as a very good example of what happened. Shivlak is this right-hander. Shivlak is this blind, fast right-hander, as I said. Disregard the guy at the top there, Max Verstappen. We'll get on to him in a minute. Mid-corner, 275. George Russell, 273. Oscar Piastri, not braking, 272. Lando Norris, 267. So 5 kilometers an hour difference in the middle of Shivlak. And I don't think there would have been anything like the same difference. I haven't measured it through the bank last corner or indeed any of the other corners. I think this is a corner, classic Oscar Piastri, where he's just able to back off a little bit less than Lando. Lando's just giving it a little bit more out of the throttle, letting the car settle a bit more. Call it not taking quite as much risk, perhaps, from his perspective. And because of that, Oscar was then able to put the pole lap together. Now, interestingly, when he actually did the pole lap in Q3, he didn't go as well on that 8-9 section as he had in Q1. He let the adrenaline come into play, and he was still pretty good. But instead of going down to 123, he went down to 130, which is a big improvement from yesterday, but still very tempting for him to get on the throttle and not to have too much time lost at what he would feel to be minimum speed. So he wasn't actually as quick as Lando, and as we saw that, Lando quickest in Sector 2 when they did those times. But then along came Max Verstappen right at the end of qualifying. The car was a little bit better, as Red Bull want to do. They improved the car, but it was still nothing like as good as a McLaren, and won't be tomorrow. It's like 0.4, 0.5 of a second lap slower than the McLaren around Zandvoort, a 1 minute 10 second lap. So still a massive difference between McLaren and Red Bull. But Max, timing his qualifying lap to perfection, crossed the line with 12 seconds to go. Most people at that point were looking at the results. Oh, wow, this is going to be good. George Russell, whoever, going to be P3. And there was Max on his lap. And that's when he did that Shivlak speed, 275. It was a case of just backing off like that, whereas Oscar was slightly bigger. And the only driver very similar to Max, but not backing off, but backing off a little bit more, was George Russell. Both Ferrari drivers through Shivlak braking, shows how bad their car is, but obviously Lewis braking more than Charles Leclerc there, as you can see. And the other driver I've got to give a massive amount of praise to is Isack Hadjar through there, 268, not braking either, just backing off. Look at him compared with Liam Lawson through there, who came out of the throttle much, much more than Isack. Anyway, getting to turn 8-9, Sector 2, and Max Verstappen approaching at higher speed, braking at just about the same place as Oscar Piastri, taking a little bit more out of the car, keeping it in fourth gear, however, running very, very low in revs in fourth, going into turn 9, but then sitting on a minimum speed of 125, much slower than Oscar Piastri, about the same as Lando Norris, for a long time before he straightens the car and gets it perfect on exit. And that is where Max Verstappen was so good under pressure. Oscar Piastri, with the adrenaline flowing, just couldn't go that slowly. Max Verstappen has this incredible patience and was therefore quickest also in Sector 2. Lando Norris very near him, but Lando, of course, couldn't match what Max was doing through corners like Shivlak. But in terms of overall grip in other parts of the lap, the McLaren was always going to be quicker than a Red Bull. So fascinating to see that. Also interesting to see the comparison between Isack Hadjar and Liam Lawson through Shivlak, but also through turn 8, turn 9. Very similar through turn 8, through the quick right-hander, 6th gear. Both of them keeping it in 4th gear for the right-hander. And if you look at the actual numbers, only 1 kilometer per hour difference in terms of minimum speed in 4th gear. Isack Hadjar very slow, 114. Liam Lawson, 115. You'd say, well, that's pretty good. Except that Isack Hadjar is staying at 114 for about a second, maybe not quite as much, 3/4 of a second, whereas Liam Lawson is just touching that minimum speed point and then immediately accelerating. And again, it underlines the importance of being patient and just sitting there waiting to get the car correctly rotated, which Hadjar is doing beautifully. I don't know why he's not in the second Red Bull already, because I mean he's just looking like almost like a Max clone. Wouldn't go as far as to say that really, but looking incredibly good and driving that section of road, quite technical section of road, exactly the same way as Max Verstappen. Going back to the Shivlak times, Fernando Alonso, 267, up there with Lando Norris, very good. Kimi Antonelli, pretty impressive that, 267. I've been giving him a hard time all year about how he's not very good on fast corners, but I guess I can continue to say that, can't I? Because look at that, George Russell 273, Kimi Antonelli, admittedly only in Q2 because he didn't get into Q3, 267, so 6 kilometres an hour difference. And that is all just the amount of confidence lift he's got going into the corner. And Lewis Hamilton looked very good all yesterday and today relative to Charles Leclerc, but then inevitably, right at the end, Charles put in the lap just to go a little bit quicker than Lewis. And it's probably summed up by what you see there. Charles Leclerc, 269 through Chivlac. Lewis Hamilton, leave a little bit of margin, 264. Both Ferrari drivers, as I say, braking for Chivlac, which says everything really about their car, because nobody else having to brake that much to get the car settled into Chivlac. I began the video by saying that it was dry. At the moment, it is a 70% chance of rain on Sunday. The interesting thing is that nobody, if you look at the top speeds, everybody's basically doing the same top speed. It doesn't look as if anybody is anticipating the wet and has got anything like a sort of Spa wet setup or a Silverstone wet setup on the car, and they're all going to go into the race if it is wet with the setup they've got, albeit with the small adjustments you can make to the brake ducts and things like that for the wet. So if it is wet tomorrow, it'll be interesting. Expect the McLaren, with everybody running effectively dry setup, expect the McLaren to have an even bigger advantage because they generate so much downforce, additional downforce, compared with, say, Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari. Shout out to Fernando Alonso for making it through to Q3. Aston Martin not quite as impressive as they looked yesterday, not helped by Lance Stroll, again going off, this time in Q1. Overconfident, I guess, or hasn't done enough days recently with Rob Wilson, one of the two, probably a combination of the two. Lost it going into the last corner, well, the second last corner, which is still flat before they get into the bank section, but it's a very, very quick right-hander. It was even worse than the mistake he made yesterday, really. He caught a left rear on the white line on the edge of the grass, and as he turned in, loaded up that section and just went straight off. A real beginner's shunt, if ever there was one, damaged the front of the car and wasn't able to go out again. But Fernando Alonso looked neat and tidy and clean throughout, and to make the top 10 again and further underline his position in that team. In his mind, nothing will be more important than keeping that drive solid for 2026, when he can sit back and enjoy driving an Adrian Newey Grand Prix car. So Oscar, Lando, Max, first three. Max will be pleased to be on the grippier side of the grid, particularly if it's wet. Interesting first corner. They can go through side by side through Tarzan hairpin and then the acceleration out of there. They've kind of they've got to get then into single file through Hunzarug, the banked Hunzarug, and then out the back. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, from Lando's point of view, he does not need to be doing any laps behind Max Verstappen. He needs to get up to P2 right at the front of the race. But again, looking at it from Lando's point of view, this was a depressing day because he had the edge yesterday. He looked really good out of the box in the car. It's his sort of circuit in terms of how well he drives that McLaren. And yet when it came down to it, Oscar Piastri found the way to out-qualify Lando Norris. And if you out-qualify your teammate at Zandvoort, it's relatively straightforward then to go and win the Grand Prix, as Mario Andretti proved in 1978. So yeah, anything when he was racing Ronnie Peterson in the JPS Lotus. So yeah, not a good day for Lando Norris. He'll be putting the brightest shine he possibly can on it, and he's pretty good at doing that. But this was a momentous achievement, I think, by Oscar Piastri to dig deep, but not in a way that was impossible, to capitalise on what he felt he was doing well. But he actually improved. I don't know whether he even knows that, but he actually improved through turns 8 and 9 as well, and that'll stand him in good stead tomorrow for the race. Quick before we go about the Ayrton Senna Lotus 98T chassis number 4 RAC watch, which in its tachymeter contains actual DNA alley from the plenum tubes used in that car, on that car, built by Team Lotus, the little alley tubes in the second half of the 1986 Grand Prix season, actually in that watch. So limited edition, you can order that now by following the details in description. And just to keep that little bit of Ayrton theme going, look at this happy group. This is 1983, and on the left we have Francolini, former Ferrari F1 team manager turned photojournalist for Autosprint, one of the key players for the great Italian magazine. Then Charlie Crichton Stewart, who was a very close friend of Frank Williams, very fast Formula 3 driver, helped Frank put the Williams Formula 1 team together, close friend of Mansour Ojeh as well, went from Williams to McLaren with Mansour Ojeh, Patrick Head, of course. Then Nick Britton in the middle, very fast racing driver in his own right in touring cars and Formula V, and a great entrepreneur, managed Jody Scheckter in the latter stages of his Grand Prix career, managed the London-Sydney Marathon, just all-round mega guy. Then Alan Henry, wearing a Bell Helmets jacket, one of the great British journalists. Nigel Roebuck, another of the great British journalists. And then in the martini jacket on the right with the sunglasses, Domingos Paidadi, who was Emerson Fittipaldi's manager and was one of the founding key players at AMG, which, as we know, is now part of Mercedes. So an interesting bunch of people. What are they all doing at Zandvoort in 1983? They're all gathering on the outside of Hunza Rug with me to watch a young Brazilian called Ayrton Senna race in the Formula Ford 2000 support race, which he won easily. And to me, that was one of the first times that the Formula One world had really stood back and recognized what Ayrton was all about. And they were all there just to watch Ayrton. The word had got out. Isn't that brilliant? And Ayrton, of course, did race at Zandvoort. Was on and off this circuit in terms of being part of the Grand Prix calendar, but he raced there in 1985 in that Dukeridge-designed JPS Lotus, which then evolved into the 98T, about which we're talking, raced by Ayrton in 1986. Two other items. Great American photographer Jay Hector emailed me last night with this photograph of James Hunt leading Niki Lauda to victory in the 75 Dutch Grand Prix. He was watching the show yesterday and sent that in. Absolutely gorgeous photograph. Great photographer, Jay. Worked for all the top American magazines and Grand Prix International in Europe. And isn't that a lovely photo going into said Chevrolet corner? Look at the size of the rear tyres they had back then in 1975. And a lot of rearward weight distribution on the Hesketh helped James with the traction of that car. Harvey Postlethwaite was a bit concerned about it, but the Goodyear tyres, very stiff sidewall tyres, or stiffer than ever before, and James used them to advantage. But that's how close Niki was. You can see he's got slight oversteer going to Chevrolet as well, bit uncharacteristic of Niki, and that's about as close as Niki ever got. James just used the traffic so well. And another email from Rob Brower, who sends in this picture of Jackie Ickx. Would you believe in 1962? When he was basically still at school, he was invited because he'd done so well in trials in Belgium, he was invited to Zandvoort to test a 50cc race bike for the Suzuki factory team, and was incredibly impressive. And as a result, got a start at Spa and was then going to race at the Japanese Grand Prix until the FIA realized how young he was, hadn't even turned 18, and wouldn't let him start. But you could say that Jackie Ickx began his competition career, in effect, at Zandvoort as well. Amazing. And another famous driver had his first Grand Prix at Zandvoort as well. This is Jim Clark in 1960 in the factory Lotus 18 with Jim Enderwright, one of the key players for Team Lotus at the time. Anyway, looking forward to the race tomorrow, which could well be wet, he keeps saying. Looking forward to that. Big thanks to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, to Track Ninja, and to REC Watches. To you, the viewer, see you tomorrow.